Cue Country Roads, everybody. The Mountaineers are bowl eligible. Carson Fox with you for Fox on West Virginia Mountaineers Sports as the Mountaineers come away with a 31-21 senior day home victory over the UCF Golden Knights. Oh man, getting to bowl eligibility at 6-5, meanwhile knocking the Knights out of bowl eligibility, dropping their record to 4-7 and really not feeling good about themselves. But I do want to lead off this show talking about all the people who I do feel really good for. I feel first and foremost awesome for all of the seniors. I think we talked about it, like over 30 seniors who had these were scholarship players who were in their fourth year of eligibility or later. A lot of COVID eligibility players still a part of this team in their fifth and sixth seasons are also using their red shirts. So awesome for all of them to get a victory. Their last time at Milan Puskar Stadium, put in a lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, as the cliche line goes, in a very changing, crazy world of college football these days with the transfer portal and NIL and all of those things that we also love to talk about all the time. But instead, staying loyal and dedicated to this program, even if they were just coming in for one season, and being a part of this program, to send them out with a victory always feels good on senior day. Secondly, for all of the fans who showed up. Seeing some of the pictures across social media right before kickoff and then right at kickoff, it was like, oh boy. It did not look like this view of Milan Puskar Stadium in behind me, but especially in the upper decks. But for all of those who braved the weather, not ideal conditions, obviously, and then, of course, really with not on that much on the line much to play for other than the prospect of getting to 7 wins for a regular season. I guess West Virginia is still mathematically, somehow, some way, in one of the 9 teams for the running still to make the Big 12 championship game entering next week. But, for all of those fans who, again, braved the weather and wanted to go out and support this team, kudos to you. Awesome job. Really making what looked like, but it's a small but mighty type of home atmosphere, still loud, still, watching on TV, still seemed loud and proud, especially in the big moments for the Mountaineers in this game. And then third and foremost, I do want to give a shout out to Neil Brown. If this is the last time that he gets to sing Country Roads on Milan Puskar Stadium's Mountaineer Field with his family, with his other coaches and players, there's nothing personal against Neil Brown and his family, of course, totally separate out of this equation, but Neil Brown the person, everything that he's brought to this program since 2019, obviously wanting to try and hard stamp his personality and his culture on this program. And it's taken time. It took a lot of time and a lot of players to leave the program. Even through the season of 2022, it sounds like he's talked about, just like it took a long time for him to really make his mark on this program. And just unfortunately, the results have not been there. And in this uber cutthroat world where results matter at the end of the day because millions and millions of dollars are on the line, it's just sad that a father type mentoring coach such as Brown, again, I don't know him anywhere from John Doe, but everything that you see on social media, you hear from other fans, is the way he tries to make a mark in the community. He really does strive to be the best head coach that he can be. I feel like up until a point this year, with just some of the kind of uncharacteristic Freudian slips that he's had, that I think I've chronicled this enough, so we don't need to beat this dead horse. But just the strain and the constant just mental fatigue and stress and anxiety I feel like that this puts on him, puts on his family, trying to give everything he can, and just the expectations that we as Mountaineer fans have are to be better, are to be, whenever you have your best roster in 6 seasons, and you say so much after having a 9-win season the year prior and expecting to take a step up. I think that was just what was so weird about the things that were mentioned on the show from Kegler's on Thursday night, talking about somewhere in the ballpark of, we're 5-5, we're not 0-10. I know that's kind of taken out of context within the full quote that he gave, but it just showed into the subconscious of Neal Brown that, like, he's giving everything he thinks that he can give. The same with the assistant coaches, same with the players. And, like, if you give the kind of effort that he's given, that the result shouldn't matter at the end of the day. And that's unfortunately counter to what we as Mountaineer fans expect and are paying for because of the prices. So if I seeing a weird, not weird, but just, I don't want to say even disappointed. It just wasn't very of a joyous embrace between he and his wife and his kids. That was kind of going around social media after the game yesterday evening. Just almost very somber, melancholy, just like kind of knowing that this is the end type of a feel. Now, we don't know until we know with any decisions that are made, but just by reading some of the body language, and it just kind of seemed like that was it. So if this is the last time, I'm glad that he gets to go off in a victory from all that he's given to this program, even despite the lack of results and true wins and ranked wins and bowl game appearances and conference championships and just all of the shortcomings that Neal Brown's had. At least he has that last moment. So happy for him and the rest of the coaches and what's going to happen. As for the game itself, and the other thing for why Neal Brown should be really happy, because this is exactly the kind of Neal Brown kind of game at the end of it that we have just become so accustomed to. This was a Neal Brown win to a T. And I'll talk about it. First and foremost, West Virginia looking awesome on its first offensive series. Didn't win the toss, or didn't get to receive first, but went on an awesome start to the drive. And what can you say about C.J. Donaldson? I think this is where I kind of want to start off with this recap video, and it's kind of speaking to a bigger picture for this whole season. Is I just think that Chad Scott, Neal Brown have not divvied up the carries well enough this season, in thinking that Jaheim White should be a 1A to C.J. Donaldson's 1B, or a 1 to C.J. Donaldson's 2. Looking at the carry distribution going into this game, and Jaheim White having more carries on the season than Donaldson, it's just not the way that I would go about it. I talked about this through the preseason, going into week 1, that was going to be something vitally important to watch for this season, is how carries were distributed. And C.J. Donaldson is one of these players that gets better, like evidenced by the Pitt game. It gets better as the game goes along with more carries. If you want to equate it to the NFL, like the way that Harris and Warren distribute their 1A to 1B carries, like Warren is a better back in fewer carries because he's more of a home run threat. It's not a guy that you want to beat 15 to 20 times or more per game, that he's more of a home run hitter, and that's exactly what Jaheim White did in this contest anyway. A long 45-yard run, setting West Virginia up inside the 2. That's awesome. C.J. Donaldson's a guy that gets better with volume. So you needed to stack carries, and that's exactly what West Virginia did on that first series. The second series that West Virginia scored on, too, some beautiful runs between both C.J. Donaldson and Garrett Green on West Virginia's first 2 scoring runs. I mean, the run to the near sideline down the right that Garrett Green seemed to almost like stiff arm the defender rather quickly from and get off and get away from him. Like, that was awesome. Put that in Garrett Green's overall highlight for his career highlights video. So loved seeing that. Loved seeing CJ. I've always said this. He's Gron. He's the Warhammer. He's the guy who needs to get the bulk of the carries. Even if we're talking about a 60-40 distribution, it's just when you're going against guys on the defensive line and linebackers who are 250 pounds plus. I mean, D linemen these days are anywhere in the ballpark of 280 to 320. And then you got linebackers who should be all around 250. You're going to take hits at Jaheim White's size of 5'7" to 5. I mean, how tall he is, 5'7" to 5'9", and maybe 180, 185 pounds. Like, that is just that weight distribution and the impact of those hits add up over the course of a season. So for a guy like C.J. Donaldson, who's 6'2", 240, he can take more of that force. Now, again, you got to spell them each correctly, and that is the job of Chad Scott, the running backs coach, of who to use in certain play calls and certain situations. And another thing that I really liked from this contest is the decision, I think it was in the third quarter or the fourth quarter, 4th and 1 I form, and Garrett Green hands off right up the gut, boom, through the A-gap, C.J. Donaldson for a first down on 4th and 1. Why, oh why, it's taken to year 6, I mean, at least season 3 with C.J. Donaldson for Neil Brown to understand that 9 times out of 10 in those 4th and 1 situations, and then depending upon how the plays prior went, if you went to Donaldson on first down, went to him on second down, beating him a third time, maybe try something different instead. But for the most part, when you are in 4th and 1 or shorter, going to C.J. Donaldson is going to work out more so than it is running the tush-push play with Garrett Green or some sort of shotgun rush to Garrett Green in short yardage. I just don't like those calls a lot of times. Even the ones that work, it's just like, you have C.J. Donaldson, why don't you use him? So his totals on the day, 19 carries for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. Did have a long of 31 on this day. That's C.J. Donaldson, baby. Love having him as a Mountaineer. Despite some of the fans out there who I feel like, say he doesn't either see the hole well initially whenever he receives the handoff, or he dances around too much in the backfield. He doesn't just hit the hole. I think it's a confidence thing. For one, it's on the offensive line. And once again, this offensive line did an, inconsistent job throughout this entire 4 quarters. 3.7 yards per carry across all 4 backs, Rodney Gallagher being a receiver who took a couple of jet sweep carries in this contest. But, just 3.7 yards per carry on 54 rushes for the day. I know you got to 200 yards rushing and you love that, but that yards per carry average, it was just up and down. Up and down, really good, I feel like, in the first half, but especially in the second half, it was spotty at best by the run blocking on this day. But not gonna beat that dead horse. Garrett Green passing on the day, where I want to give the shout out, I feel like, is to Hudson Clement. Just had so many great catches, especially the nail in the coffin play on 4th down in the 4th quarter, up 10, sealed the deal, so Green could kneel it out and end the day. 5 catches for 81 yards. Each of his 5 catches were really important in this game, but just, again, Garrett Green, okay, maybe below average. Passing the ball, just 13 for 21 for 118 yards and a touchdown, but especially those runs that he had in the first half. Had 18 carries for 72 positive yards. With sacks, he had negative 23, so it equated to just 49 yards on the day. And then defensively, for West Virginia to hold UCF to 21 points in this contest, I'm going to chalk that up as a win. R.J. Harvey, as good as advertised. The one drive, UCF's first score of the game in the second quarter, where he really pretty much did it himself that whole drive. I think 3 carries for 48 yards and had the score on the day. 16 carries, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is their whole offense. With Dylan Risk, who did not impress me very much on this day, just a couple of plays here and there. But talking about Harvey, for West Virginia to kind of keep him as contained as humanly possible, didn't let any of the other guys really go off on this day, and only really gave up one big play because West Virginia got up 28-0 into the beginning of the third quarter, and that was what I feel like was the most pivotal section of the game. Most pivotal point was when West Virginia was able to score, go up 21-7 before the half, capped off by that really nice one-handed catch of Rodney Gallagher looked over the opposite shoulder, couldn't find the ball, ever so quickly turned to his other shoulder. The ball was there, just stuck out one hand, was able to pull it, snag it in for the touchdown. Really glad that play, I think that was a third down. So for that to work out on that play, really, really needed that. Then to go into the half, getting the ball out of the half, and then scoring on that next possession, that changed everything. To go up 28-7, you could be as mediocre as West Virginia was in the second half offensively. All you needed was another field goal, and they were able to hold on because that was too much of a deficit to make up on this defense. Where I thought that the defense, well, and it unfortunately comes down to one player. Garnet Hollis Jr. had a rough day. Kobe Hudson ate him up. That was the one player that I talked about in the pregame show, that if there was one pass catcher from UCF to watch out for, because he had 2 touchdowns in last year's contest down in Orlando. Kobe Hudson only had 2 on the day, but the one was for a big one, 45-yarder. He just had made a double move on Garnet Hollis Jr., bid on the fake, wasn't fast enough to catch up to him, perfectly placed ball by Risk, easy touchdown. I know, and I was like, oh, after he had made a couple of boneheaded, he just plays too far off the ball. He plays way too far off the ball. He lets the receivers catch the ball and wants to tackle them. Does a good job, again, I feel like, in tackling, but you gotta play more press, or you gotta be more, on your man, give better coverage, rather than just letting them catch the ball every single time. That's unfortunately what I feel like, and that's why I was a little bit scoffing at the idea of him getting an East-West Shrine game invitation prior to this game. I think expecting Garnet Hollis Jr. to come in there and be the kind of number 1 corner, mano-a-mano, match him up against the best wide receiver of the opponent week in and week out, has been an error in judgment by general manager Drew Fabianich and head coach Neil Brown, defensive coordinator Jeff Coons, previously Jordan Leslie, for this season. Unfortunately, he just has, and I don't know if it's Shadon Brown's coaching, but what I see on the results on the field is that he has been more bad than good this season. And this was just another case in point, and this is why I'm a little bit worried already, thinking about next week's game against Texas Tech, of who he's going to have to cover, or how Texas Tech is going to try and scheme up to go after him. Now, did he provide really good run support on that one play against R.J. Harvey and bringing him down? Yes. He's got good size. He's got really good size. I feel like at 6'2", almost 200 pounds or just thereof. And he's long, lanky. And that's why I think that's what's so weird, is he has this perfect body frame potential that almost Robert Sands, or probably a good comparison would be like Rasul Douglas. But I just think perhaps because West Virginia sits in this zone, it's just not meshing. Garnet Hollis' skill set with what West Virginia wants him to do defensively, and maybe they're coaching him to do that. Maybe they're coaching him, depending upon different situations, to play more off the ball, first step back, and let the receiver try and nickel and dime you down the field. Just to me, you're asking a player who's to not play to his strengths. And that's just been unfortunate. I know he doesn't have the help, with the safeties, because West Virginia's practically missed Aubrey Burks all season. Kakara Tarnu has stepped up in recent weeks. Jaheim Joseph has been also pretty inconsistent, I feel like, this season. Anthony Wilson doesn't nearly have the size that Hollis Jr. is, so they're putting a lot on his plate. But being a fifth-year senior, what they're probably paying him in NIL, you're going to draw the opponent's one, go out and challenge him. And for the most part, he's been eaten up this season. Again, a couple of other things that I liked from this contest. Again, the fourth down conversions I feel like were huge. The one by C.J. Donaldson on the a 1-yard rush up the middle. I felt like in the fourth quarter at the very end. Also, it was kind of a pick play that wasn't called to Justin Robinson. Kind of a a rub route. Cole Taylor, the announcers were talking about this, how Cole Taylor just kind of got right in the perfect position. Could have expected a call potentially, but instead didn't. But the one I want to talk about the most, it was at the start of the fourth quarter, 4th and 8 at the UCF 35. At this point in time, West Virginia's only up 28-14. So, there's more than enough time potentially for UCF to make a comeback, but Garrett Green takes off on a rush down the right-hand sideline. Almost looked as if he was going to get stopped for about a yard or so short, but just kind of spun out of it ever so slightly, evaded the defender, fell forward, and picked up the first down. So not only to go for it on 4th and 8, but then to rush with it, and Garrett Green's able to pick it up on the ground himself. Just another, nobody makes that except Garrett kind of play. I mean, I know you could talk about the great one, Pat White, or, some other mobile quarterbacks that have played for some other teams. But I'm just saying, I don't know if Nico Marchiol picks up that play. I think it'd have to be some sort of a pass completion. But he was able to do so. West Virginia goes on, gets all the way down to the UCF 18, kicks an insurance points field goal to go up 31-14. And at that point in time, just the way that UCF was kind of managing this game, you felt a little more comfortable at that point in time. And I know that UCF did come back down. They did turn the ball over on downs, but then they ended up getting a touchdown to cut it to 31-21. But again, that last series, 5 minutes left, West Virginia picks up the 4th down because of the Robinson catch that I mentioned. And then Garrett Green completing the catch downfield to Hudson Clement. So just a couple of how West Virginia missed out on 4th down conversions against Baylor. Instead, on the opposite side, converted on this day. Played really good defense to shut down as best as humanly possible R.J. Harvey, other than the one touchdown over the top to Kobe Hudson on Garnet Hollis Jr. The defense, I felt like on this day, was pretty solid and just needed to get up early, play Neil Brown type football, use clock, almost used 38 and a half minutes on this day, wore UCF out, held on to the ball, didn't let them score, and risk didn't kill them. It's simple as that. I mean, I don't think we need to surgically go into huge details on this game, but West Virginia did just enough to get a victory. But this is another prime example of how this just isn't good enough quality or style points of West Virginia football that make me want to charge down the street in defense of Neil Brown to keep him around. That there are just too many case in point examples, and I've talked about this on previous episodes, of how West Virginia under Neil Brown cannot blow out other opponents. UCF was not a good enough team, especially defensively, to feel as if that game should have been in any way, shape, or form into the fourth quarter, out of hand. This should have been very comfortable. I feel like the 2018 team would have blown UCF out of the water, even with the weather conditions on this game. And that's just unfortunately where we are now, looking toward the end of the 2024 season. If West Virginia just would have if they would have won the brawl, if they would have looked more competent against Penn State in a loss, and they would have won one of those two games against Iowa State and or Kansas State, totally different situation. Totally different situation. Winning the brawl would have made people feel so much better, especially whenever beating Albany, then beating Pitt, then beating Oklahoma State would have made that Cole Rush game even bigger. If you win that game or the Kansas State game, they're going into next week still feeling really good about their chances of potentially making the Big 12 championship game, despite the loss to Baylor. And I'm not even talking about the Baylor, how you could have coached the game differently to win the Baylor game. Now, I get it. A lot of things, and I'll talk about this on an upcoming video once the regular season ends. I've been kicking this idea around since yesterday, kind of talking about really highlights of the 2024 season with individual players and the lowlights or disappointments for the 2024 season, because there are just some things that were, like, I think first and foremost, not to give away my video, Aubrey Burks. Like, to think that Aubrey Burks you wouldn't have pretty much for the entire season, or for the times that he did contribute to you, didn't make much of a difference for this team this season. Like, how are you supposed to account for that? Now, there are things like not adding more to the defensive line instead of trying to add Greg Genross, Ryder Burton, and Justin Robinson for this team that you did after the spring portal round of transfer portal recruiting that you could have done differently that I think would have helped you out. But there's just some things, and that's why recruiting and both high school and transfer portal recruiting is so important. But from a preparation standpoint, I think they didn't make far enough strides in the spring, definitely in the summer, to go into this season where I feel like they picked up off from where the 2023 season ended. And for the most part, for much of this season, it's just been a wing and a prayer. and this game was another case in point of that. Is they got lucky with a turnover early. I know one came and bit them later in the contest. Garrett Green's like Will Greer-esque 2018 versus Oklahoma pass that was fumbled out of his hands and recovered deep in West Virginia territory, giving valuable field position to UCF, and then easy score the opposite way. That's how UCF scored their first turnover or touchdown in this contest. But I just think that they don't ever make games look easy. Doesn't matter the opponent. That's what's so perplexing to me as a fan, is West Virginia can look the same as they do against a Penn State or even a Pitt as they do Oklahoma State, or I guess Oklahoma State's maybe the one performance, and it's just because they're so god awful this year, especially defensively, that game will completely out of one-sided. But Iowa State, Kansas State, they don't ever make anything look easy, and I just don't understand why. So it always comes back to coaching for me, especially beyond the first scripted offensive series. Like, West Virginia looks so good on its first series, and then other teams make adjustments, and then they're just like, I don't know. So let's wing and a prayer and just hope some things happen. Either collect some turnovers, you got to get a stop here and there. And I know that's football. Like, you're not going to score every single play, every single series and all that. And lack of talent, I feel like, especially in the receiving core. I know that Traylon Ray was out in this. I think that did have an ancillary impact on the game, especially for West Virginia's ability to throw downfield. But Garrett Green was able to make up for that. I feel like with the rapport that he has with Hudson Clement being the most complete receiver that West Virginia has on his team, vitally important for him to take even a greater stride no matter who's the coach in 2025, because he'll be West Virginia's number one returning wide receiver. But that's just where I would have hoped that he and Rodney Gallagher would be further along. I know that he's just a sophomore, but would be further along in their development. Not having Jaden Bray all season. That was supposed to be your big wide receiver transfer portal addition. He's given you nothing this season. I don't understand how it hasn't worked out better with Cole Taylor this season between the two of them. I thought he would make more of a downfield type impact. Maybe he's been held in more to block. I've been trying to watch that a little bit more, but watching the ball, just trying to see. And then him getting inserted, swapped with Traylon Davis, a little more so this season than last season. I would think that they were be further along. But just to be where West Virginia is in its pass game from last year to this year is one of the more disappointing things of this entire season, because it just hasn't stretched open the field enough, and West Virginia just doesn't look like it knows what it's doing. either from a route running perspective, creating separation, how strategically it's going to either impact the game. And I've said this 1,000 times, so I don't want to keep wasting my breath, but throwing shorter routes, giving wide receivers the opportunity to make plays with yards after the catch, and just this was another case in point that I think there was an opportunity missed here for West Virginia to be better in the pass game, and they just weren't. Thankfully, they made enough plays in the rushing game between Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson, and Garrett Green when they needed to, and UCF gave West Virginia some short fields, gave them some good valuable field position. They were able to work the ball down the field, use time of possession, and get out of there with a victory. So that's all I really have to say on this game. 31-21, take the victory, get to bowl eligibility. We'll see what happens with the decisions on the head coach if it's made in going into tomorrow or sometime this week. How does that impact the game next week against Texas Tech and then a potential bowl? Some of the articles that I'm reading online from different outlets with bowl projections for this team, seeing like the Gasparilla Bowl in Tampa, Florida, December 20th against Florida. Like that actually makes for a more intriguing matchup, I feel like, than the Independence Bowl against Army or the Guaranteed Late Bowl against Minnesota. Like I'm not doing that again. I'm not staying up till 2 a.m. to watch that debacle. So if West Virginia could draw an interesting matchup against an interesting opponent like Florida, who I feel like is really hot right now, one of the hottest teams in the country, like that provides some intrigue. But I'm still not at a point yet watching West Virginia that I feel any sort of confidence. I'm just glad. I'm glad that this game resulted in, very similarly, I feel like, to the Arizona game. Like, you got your turnover that you needed. You used time of possession. You were able to get up by multiple scores and hang on in the fourth quarter. And that's the kind of game that West Virginia needs against Texas Tech and against Florida or anyone that they play in a bowl, and hopefully could get to 8 wins for the season some way, somehow. So, love to hear your thoughts, good, bad, or indifferent. Leave your comments here on YouTube. If you like this, please like it so more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week, and I have a lot of fun doing it. I'll be back later this week to preview Texas Tech, the finale of the regular season for the Mountaineers. And then we got a whole lot happening, I feel like, at the beginning of December. If we're talking about a coaching change potentially, if we're talking about a bowl matchup, the early signing day for high school, the transfer portal in December opening up, and all of the influx and of people out of the program and potentially into the program, basketball going on. It is an exciting time, as always. Never a dull moment, as I like to tell my friends. Never a dull moment in Mountaineer land. There's always something to talk about, so I'll be bringing it to you. So thanks for tuning in. Let's go. Hail West Virginia. And happy Thanksgiving.